Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Will Robinson Smith will be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Currently, T-minus 26 minutes, 33 seconds, and counting away from the launch of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 4 East, Slick 4E at Vandenberg. This is the Starlink 11-1 mission, as you may have inferred from our title slide here. Liftoff currently scheduled for the time at the bottom of the screen, and fortunately, we do have word from SpaceX that fueling is underway, which means we are not slipping farther into this window, which for those of us on the East Coast is a wonderful thing. Currently targeting that T0 at 12:24 a.m. Pacific, 3:24 a.m. Eastern, 07:24 UTC for our friends around the world. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, running the technical operations of this broadcast this morning. Our launch photographers, Vandenberg and Steve Michael Kane, of course, have the launch off. This is a West Coast venture. As of this singular moment in time, as we're beginning this broadcast, SpaceX is currently continuing to press forward along with NASA Northrop Grumman for a launch attempt of the NG-21 mission from here in Florida, from Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. However, as those of you who were here with us for the launch attempt on Saturday, the weather still remains 10% feasible for a launch today. The tropical activity has materialized into a named storm. It is now Tropical Storm Debbie, anticipated to make landfall as Hurricane Debbie once it reaches the Sunshine State. So we're continuing to keep an eye on the track of that storm. Per communication from Mission Control Center Houston at the Johnson Space Center in Texas, up to the astronauts of Expedition 71 on board the space station, they're anticipating making a further determination on the launch opportunity today around 7 a.m. Eastern. The communication was actually 11 GMT. So we will keep you apprised of whether or not they are in fact going to make a run at it today. Although, were I a betting man, I would very highly doubt it. But we'll see. And of course, be sure to keep your eyes on our launch calendar on our website, spaceflynow.com. And of course, we'll provide updates on our social channels as well. With all that being said, we're T-minus 22 minutes, 50 seconds and counting to the launch of this mission. 23 Starlink satellites on board this particular Falcon flight, as astrophysicist and astronomer Jonathan McDowell, expert orbital tracker, noted on his social media. This mission with 23 Starlinks on board is the most for a Vandenberg-based launch. So the thought is that either the Starlink satellites heading up to the 11th shell for the mega constellation are lighter, or there's been a performance increase in the Falcon 9 rocket. As we continue on, want to briefly thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat. Appreciate you being up with us at a inopportune hour for some of us. So big thanks to Callistia Lee, Stephanie B for hopping in this morning. We'll of course keep an eye out as well for any of the other mods should they happen to pop in. But if you haven't already, say hello to Stephanie and Callistia. Also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like I'm Lita, Patty, Chinchil, M. Teresa, Josh Ganine, Brian Daniels, Aiden Green, Tony McCoy, Wicked Code, JJ Jones, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments from the Cape in 4K. Last but not least, or before I get to that, thanks to Psychonaut69 for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership and to Callistia Lee for gifting 5. Very much appreciated from the two of you, and to our newest 6 channel members. Welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you with us. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question and you'd like to participate in the show and your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. We'll be keeping an eye out for that as well as for relevant comments from our wonderful channel members. And a big thanks to Apocalypse Cal for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that from you as well. Let's go ahead and talk about where we are in the timeline of things here. Some of the milestones that we've passed and the ones yet to come for SpaceX. Of course, the countdown process began with the go-ahead for the start of fueling that was issued around T-minus 30 minutes is when that poll would have concluded nominally, setting up for the start of fueling, the T-minus 35-minute mark. Begins with loading of RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene on both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket, as well as liquid oxygen on the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they begin loading cryogenic helium on board Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same happens about 5 minutes later on the second stage. At T-minus 23 minutes, the loading of the second stage kerosene tank should conclude. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. That is the thermal conditioning for the feed lines before they begin second stage liquid oxygen load. Process starts at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, but we know that by the So-called big vent that comes up at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That sets up the event that we're coming upon next in less than a minute. T minus 16 minutes is when second stage lock load begins, the final fueling milestone that has really yet to begin here in Vandenberg. T minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway and involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, protecting the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full, and then at T minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. Starts with the clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings. Then here at Vandenberg, the transporter erector for the strong back will recline about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff. About 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. 2 minutes before launch, same is true on the second stage, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The final 60 seconds control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlins ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the bird for AT0 liftoff. T minus 15 minutes, 15 seconds. Or at 12:24 a.m. Pacific, 3:24 a.m. Eastern, 07:24 UTC. Currently T minus 14 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Want to thank the more than 2,500 of you who are joining with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage from wherever they're watching in the world. Go ahead and let us know where you're joining in from. Just taking a look at the live chat. I empathize with Matt B, who's joining us from my hometown of Sacramento, California. And yeah, it's unfortunately not a spot where we actually get to see the launches with our own eyes, but every now and again, might be able to catch a glimpse if the lighting conditions are right, but we shall see. The trajectory is certainly not in the most optimal spot for that. Want to thank channel member Lita for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Lita. Saying thank you, Spaceflight Now, Will, team, and mods for your sacrifice. Yeah, well, appreciate that. Great to be a part of this awesome channel. Well, thank you, Lita, for your ongoing support. Same as well to Pasmaria H for being a member with us for 2 months. Saying shout out for school educators and staffing, the cafeteria, custodians, secretaries, make it possible every day for your children's education. And I will second that as the son of an educator, and I have a couple of sisters who are both in the education system as well, the university level. So big ups for all of the teachers, administrators, and as Paz was saying, all of the support staff that make our schools function. Last for now, thanks to Cam Research for also marking 2 months at a channel membership at the pad leader level. Saying thanks, Will, for the stream, and much appreciated to Apocalypse Cow for the membership. Thanks to Apocalypse Cow for bringing Cam in, and thanks, Cam, for sticking with us. Thanks to Lazarus 7049 for a $5 super chat saying thank you for your work. Appreciate the note of support. T minus 11 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket's going to be heading once it leaves the pad, since we were talking about visibility. And let's take a look at where this Falcon's going to be flying in the most optimal spots to actually see it once it leaves the pad at Slick 4E or Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Similar to the Starlink's headed to the ninth shell, this rocket's going to be lifting off heading in a southeasterly trajectory along the coast of California and Mexico. First stage booster, once it separates from the upper stage, will follow that orange path landing on the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. And of course, things will continue to be more active on the West Coast in the coming years. Might have missed this news nugget and everything that happened over the last couple of weeks, but SpaceX will be moving all of its Dragon operations from Florida to Vandenberg and the West Coast. So all of the crew and cargo Dragon spacecraft that used to be splashing down off the coast of Florida following the Crew 9 return, those Dragons will now splash down off the coast of Southern California. Reason for that is the trunk of the Dragon, while originally thought to burn up entirely after being jettisoned prior to the deorbit burn of the Dragon spacecraft. Turns out that wasn't quite the case, and there were some notable chunks, starting with the trunk of the Crew 1 mission, that were found not to have damaged any property or caused any injuries or worse, but enough of them, enough times were making it through and landing on land that they decided it was going to be safer to move Dragon operations to the West Coast. So we'll see one of the Dragon recovery vessels, unclear if it's going to be Megan or Shannon, leave Florida, make its way out to the West Coast for Dragon support. After the booster separates and lands on the drone ship, of course, the payload fairings will be jettisoned a little bit downrange of that as well. SpaceX will scoop them up on a recovery vessel after they splash down under the support of parachutes. SpaceX saving about $6 million per recovery. I was looking at the countdown clock when I said that T minus 8 minutes, 38 seconds to lift off. This is what that recovery operation looks like. On board this Falcon flight are 23 Starlink satellites. Unlike some of the more recent launches that we've seen from California, there are no direct-to-cell service-capable Starlinks on this mission. Each of the Starlinks clocks in about 1,760 pounds, or about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers, as opposed to the previously used Krypton Hall thrusters. They're built in Redmond, Washington, nearish Seattle. They'll be deployed at about 180 miles or 290 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. And courtesy of HEO Robotics, this is what a Starlink V2 mini satellite looks like, as captured by one of their satellites from last year. Currently T minus 7 minutes, 14 seconds and counting, coming up on the start of the engine chill down sequence. We're now currently T minus 5 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank should be full, about a minute away from the beginning of the strong back retract sequence. Before we get there, briefly, let's go ahead and talk about the flight history of this particular Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number 1082 in the SpaceX fleet, preparing to make its sixth flight tonight in these overnight hours. And with a Starlink launch that was Starlink 7-9 on January 3rd, followed by 7-14 on February 15th. This booster has been primarily launching Starlink missions.
Falcon
The
9
one
tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
deviation from that was USSF 62 on April 11th that sent up the weather system follow-on microwave satellite, the first for that program. There was Starlink 8-2 on May 10th, and then Starlink 9-1 on June 19th, which brings us here to Starlink 11-1, which you can kind of see
Strong back
the
retract is starting.
outline of the Falcon 9 rocket from the previous shot, although it is very much a Vandenberg type morning. The fog has rolled in and it is quite persistent. And while it is nigh impossible to actually see the Falcon 9 rocket, the strong back is, in fact, reclining away from the vehicle as we just heard the callouts. Again, here at Vandenberg, the transporter erector of the strong back pulls back about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket prior to liftoff. As we come into the final stretch here, first off, want to thank the more than 5,700 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you would hit that like button to allow some more folks to find their way in before we hit the point of liftoff here with this Falcon flight. Also want to thank a few folks for your support this morning. Thanks to Cheryl Harrison for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Cheryl. 8 Aaron, the $2 super chat, asking if this will be visible from San Diego.
Stage 1, locks load complete.
It would be based on the trajectory, but it entirely is based on how much cloud is hanging around your area and what the local weather conditions are. But based off of the flight path, it should be. Thanks to Kathy Barnett for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate you, Kathy. Steve Long with a $3 super chat. Thank you, Steve. Gooch Kawa with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Gooch, for supporting us at that level. The very excited looking emoji. Tony McCoy gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, and Michael McRory gifting one as well. Appreciate that from the two of you, that generosity. So we're coming upon the last fueling milestone here in just a few seconds. Thank Seeing iFrog for a $10 super chat, saying thanks for another launch. Eat that Falcon and hope it finds Wally. Stephen hopping in my ear just to let me know in response to
Stage 2, locks load complete.
Aaron that it should be visible about a minute to a minute and a half after liftoff from San Diego. And with that call, you just heard the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. That call for ground gas closeouts, which would be that final venting that is very difficult to make out, although you can see in this vantage point, if you notice a little bit of movement in the fog, that excess movement is not the fog itself, that is the ground gas closeout.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, we're just waiting for the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch, which should be coming in the next few seconds.
LD is go for launch.
And with that, we are now just about 30 seconds in real time from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket.
T minus 30 seconds.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and step back ourselves for just a brief moment, listening to the final countdown from SpaceX, and we'll be back with you on the other side for additional commentary.
T minus 15. T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressures are nominal.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And some good call outs from SpaceX so far, all at this stage nominal with this flight, the Falcon 9 rocket and the Starlink 11-1 mission. Coming up next, we are going to be hitting a few different milestones in fairly rapid succession. In about a minute, we'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That'll be followed 3 seconds later by stage separation.
Stage 2 engine chill.
And the second stage engine start, SES-1. That call you just heard for a second stage engine chill, they're thermally conditioning that Merlin vacuum engine on the upper stage for the start of its burn. Payload fairings will be deployed just before the 3-minute mark or thereabouts. About 10 seconds to MECO.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 startup.
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Some more good callouts from SpaceX as you saw those 23 Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. Now about 3.5 minutes into flight. Next milestone we're tracking here is the start of the first stage entry burn beginning. Comes up at about T plus 6 minutes and 5 seconds. The burn lasting about 24 seconds in total. as we come upon the 5th minute of flight so far. Nominal mission at this stage. As you're seeing the toggling between the two different views presented on the Falcon 9 upper stage. It's done to allow SpaceX engineers back on the ground to continuously see both sides of the Merlin vacuum engine and ensure that it is continuing on with a good
Both
burn.
vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Good call from SpaceX. On the left-hand side, just now you were seeing the inside of the inner stage looking upward. Well, I can't really see anything right now. We're looking down in between two of the hypersonic grid fins on the outside of the Falcon 9's first stage. That view will get much brighter in just a few seconds here, as we're now less than 10 seconds away from the start of that first stage entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
This burn designed to rapidly slow down the Falcon 9 first stage, so you can see the speedometer
Stage
plummet
1 entry burn
dramatically.
shutdown.
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
That call out for FTS being saved, the flight termination system safety mechanism built into both stages of the rocket, now being saved, essentially no longer being needed at this stage in flight. T plus 7 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away from the start of the landing burn for the Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage
Stage
2.
1 transonic.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
Good call outs there. Falcon 9 first stage now traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 2 terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
For a 6th time, booster 1082 safely down on the drone ship.
Stage 2 shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And good call outs from SpaceX there with the conclusion of the first burn of the Merlin vacuum engine. The upper stage now entering into a parking orbit where it will continue to coast until T plus 53 minutes, 53 seconds, at which point there will be a brief 1-second burn to help circularize the orbit. That'll set up the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour and 47 seconds. So at this stage, all continuing to move nominally with this mission. Before we conclude with our mission stats, I want to thank a few more folks for your support this morning. Our thanks to Big Bear California Live Camp for a $5 super chat saying, keep up the great work. Glad to support your efforts. Outstanding coverage. That's very kind of you, Big Bear. Thank you for being with us this morning. Also, thanks to Rodent Nolstadam for continuing on with channel membership at the Pi Leader level for 3 months, saying go for launch. Yes, and a good launch so far from the West Coast. Steve Wong with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Steve. Saying a little extra to help out the channel, which is always very much appreciated. The Russian Floof Cat, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $2 super chat at launch, saying beam me up, Scotty, and it sort of looks like a transporter beam almost as the Falcon 9 was ascending. Luma High Mike with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Mike. Darth Lawrence gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Very much appreciated, Darth. And a welcome to our 5 newest channel members. Grendel Wizard with a $5 super chat saying, just saw the launch from my rooftop here in Riverside. Good show. That's always good to hear. Glad the weather conditions were such they were able to see that. And Michael McGrory, hoping against hope that the weather will hold for today's launch of the NG-21 mission from the Cape. Considering that we've got a now tropical storm Debbie, which again will become Hurricane Debbie by the time it makes landfall around the Big Bend in Florida. Again, if I were a betting man, I would be pretty pessimistic for a launch today, but we will continue to track this and, of course, let you know what NASA decides. Taking a look at some satellite imagery right now. Let's go ahead and close things out with a look at our mission stats as they currently stand, with a good liftoff and landing of that Falcon 9 first stage booster. Again, marking the 6th flight of 1082. This was the 359th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 74th Falcon 9 flight of 2024. This was the 303rd Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 77th launch on the year, including Falcon Heavy launch and 2 Starship missions. This was their 118th orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 86th orbital launch from Pad 4E at Vandenberg, and the 154th overall launch from that site. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 98th landing of a booster on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. That marked the 263rd drone ship landing and the 334th booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some industry stats around the world, this was the 26th orbital launch from California, the 80th from U.S. soil, the 89th from U.S. rocket company, and the 142nd orbital launch from around the world. So far, there have been 6 orbital mishaps in total, either total or partial. Moving out to the pie chart, you can see the breakdown of all that. U.S. with now 89 launches on the year, about 63% of the pie. China holding a quarter of the pie with their 35. Russia has 8, Japan with 4, India and Iran with 2 apiece, North Korea with a total launch failure, and the European Space Agency with a partial launch failure, which is why it has those 2 asterisks next to it. Of course, much of the maiden flight of the Ariane 6 rocket was successful, but it did encounter that upper stage issue, which is why we're giving it that partial mishap status. And with that, we're going to go ahead and begin to close things down here. Thanks real quick to G. Crawford SoCal for a $2 super chat hitting at the buzzer. Thanks to our wonderful moderators who've been holding it down in the live chat. Callisti Lee and Stephanie B. Appreciate the both of you. Thanks to our Spacefly Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Mostly thanks to you for being with us at what is, for a number of folks, especially here in the U.S., very odd hour to be up, but appreciate you joining us for another rocket launch. Again, keep your eyes on our social channels for updates on the NG-21 mission. And we'll also update our launch schedule accordingly on spaceflightnow.com. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves. Be good to others. For those in the path of tropical storm, soon to be Hurricane Debbie, please stay safe. Heed local weather warnings and advisories. And until next time, folks, we will see you later. Bye-bye.